Our guest on this edition of CityWide is the Comptroller of the City of New York, John Liu. Thanks for joining us.
Always glad to be here, Ken, and congratulations. 15 years, that's big.
Another 15, I might get a pension. We'll talk a little bit more about pensions in a minute. So I think most of our viewers know that you're the Chief Financial Officer of the city, but the charter gives a variety of responsibilities to the Comptroller. There are also political initiatives the Comptroller takes. I think it might be interesting for them to hear how you define your role as the Comptroller of the City of New York.
Well, as you can imagine, it's not an easy time to be Chief Financial Officer of anything, let alone the great city of New York. But I have to say, 17 months into this position, I truly relish every day getting up and figuring out what needs to be done, and I'm excited to have this opportunity to help steer our city in the right direction. There are very distinct responsibilities that the City Comptroller has as defined by the city charter, auditing city agencies, approving city contracts, making investments for our pension funds. I ran for this office because I knew it would be a way to also create some change within this city, help level the playing field, create opportunities, expand opportunities for people in this city, and at the same time make sure that we are on sound fiscal footing. So the charter defines the position to some extent, but I know that as with any elected position, there's always a great deal more that can be done. What you put into it is what you get out of it.
So you are the Chief Investment Officer of the city. You're also the Chief Fiscal Officer of the city. The mayor says that public employee pensions are an unsustainable burden on the taxpayers and the budget overall. You seem to have a different perspective on the city's pension system.
I'm not sure exactly what words the mayor has used. He has talked about the fact that pension cost has gone up significantly from about $1.5 billion 10 years ago to now costing city taxpayers in the $8 billion range.
That's a lot of money.
And it's a huge increase, a very rapid increase, to the point where it is now consuming a little more than 11% of our city's budget. A lot of money, no question about it. The costs are high. The question of whether pensions are sustainable is a question that has to be at the forefront of public debate and public policy, especially as we are continuing to face difficult budget pressures at the city level as well as in different levels of government. So that's why my office has studied the issue very carefully. We, a couple of months ago, released a report explaining why the pension costs went up so significantly, $1.5 billion to now $8 billion. We called it the $8 billion question because that $8 billion number has been out there. And we found that the biggest reason why pension costs has gone up so significantly and is now eating such a significant part of the city's budget is that we have just emerged from probably the worst decade in market performance in recent memory. It stands in stark contrast to the 80s and the 90s, and probably at the end of the 1990s, there was some irrational exuberance where some decisions were made that in hindsight were probably not the right thing to do with our pension benefits. But this past 10 years, market returns have been awful. And so that's driven our pension costs significantly, and that increased cost will continue for another few years. So it's going to increase from about 11.1, 11.2% of our city's budget to somewhere closer to 12% of our city's budget. But it won't continue to skyrocket as it has for the last several years. But we're seeing that beginning in 2016, the pension cost, specifically as a percentage of the city's budget, will begin to decrease significantly. And the main reason for that is that there are already new lower pension benefits, new lower tiers of benefits that have been enacted in recent years that are beginning to kick in, and that the cost reductions will now start to materialize beginning in 2016.
Let me just make sure I've got this straight. In the private sector, a lot of people get what are called a defined contribution. The employer and the worker put in a certain amount of money, and then the stock market will make that more or less valuable as time goes on. With public employees, they get what are called defined benefits, which means the workers are entitled to a certain level of pension benefits, and if the stock market doesn't do what it's supposed to do, then the taxpayers have to make up the shortfall. I got that basically right?
That is correct.
So what you're saying is that because of reforms that were done previously, we'll start to see where that benchmark for those city workers gets lowered. A new worker today doesn't get the same benefits that somebody was hired 20 years ago. We'll start to see the results of that in about 5 years.
The results in terms of significantly lower costs. And there is a national debate, actually probably an international debate, about the merits between the merits of defined contribution plans versus defined benefit plans. If the goal is retirement income security, then the defined benefit plan is more cost effective from the plan sponsor's point of view, in this case city government's point of view, to deliver the same kind of retirement income. If the goal is just to give an extra percentage of pay as a fringe benefit, then the defined contribution sometimes makes more sense. But the retirement income security, I think, is a very important issue, not only for public sector employees, but private employees all throughout the country.
There's a lot of talk, though, these days that I know that your office has issued a report saying that public employees, when you factor everything all in, are actually paid a little bit less than their counterparts in the private sector. But I don't think the public perceives it that way, that they see big contract increases negotiated by mayors. I mean, is it really true that a secretary in your office is making considerably less than a secretary in a private sector company if you factor in his or her pensions and health care and everything else?
At the beginning of this year, my office did study in detail. Well, actually, the study had been going on since last year, but at the beginning of this year, we released a study that compared public employees' pay in New York City to private sector employees. And we found that the straight pays, on average, city employees make 17% less than private sector employees here in New York City. Now, I'm not sure that the public perception is that city employees make that much more. I think what you have seen, at least in anecdotal stories written in tabloids, have led people to believe that. I don't know if it's indeed the public perception, but what we did was we looked at straight census data. It wasn't data from my office, it was census data, and we looked at a simple comparison. What are private sector employees making in New York City, and what are the city employees making? And there's a 17% difference. Now, that does not factor in everything else. It's just a simple comparison of paychecks. But we did start to look at the value of the pension and medical benefits, and the pension benefits are more valuable for city employees than for private sector employees. The medical benefits are also more valuable, but they don't come anywhere close to making up for the 17% difference. Your question about the secretary, what we have found is that on the low end of the pay range, city employees do in fact make more money than the same kinds of employees would make in the private sector. On the high end, city employees make substantially less than lawyers, doctors, some other types of professional positions. So there's this phenomenon in New York City, as well as in other parts of government all throughout the country. There's something called wage compression, which is that the lowest paid workers are not paid that low, and nobody really makes a lot of money. Whereas in the private sector, you have a much wider range of pay scale.
So Ed Koch, former mayor, through the fiscal crisis, and others have called, Dick Ravitch, the former lieutenant governor, have called for shared sacrifice. We're facing the prospects of layoffs of city workers, cutbacks in services. But union leaders like Mike Fishman are saying, wait a second, we're already the ones that have borne the brunt of the recession. So do you think that shared sacrifice is the approach that people should be taking to getting through the next couple of years of fiscal difficulties, or is there another approach that would be better?
Of course there has to be shared sacrifice. Everybody has to sacrifice. Everybody's got to tighten their belt as we attempt to emerge from what is perhaps the greatest recession since the Great Depression, everybody's got to sacrifice. But it is misleading for leaders to say there should be shared sacrifice, almost predicated upon some kind of assumption that there has not already been shared sacrifice. I think private sector employees are hurting, no question about it. Public sector employees are hurting as well. They're not, I don't think they're hurting as much as some of the private sector workers are. But neither were our public employees benefiting greatly in the heydays of the 1980s and 1990s. So the swings, the upswings as well as the downswings are more volatile and extreme for the private sector, more modulated for public sector employees. But as we move forward and figure out what compensation and benefit policy should be for our city employees, we should do that with a lens on what has happened over time and what led us to this point, as opposed to simply looking at this snapshot for what it is right now.
We're going to talk about your role as a watchdog over the city purse when CityWide continues right after this.
Mom, I'm not gonna go to college.
What are you saying? You've got to go to college.
Well, they offered me a job and
Son, college is much more important.
no,
Yes.
no, Mom.
Yes.
Anyways, it's my decision.
Okay, well then decide what degree you're going to get because you will go to college.
Their tomorrow depends on your words today. The Hispanic Scholarship Fund has the information you need to help your kids go to college.
Welcome back to CityWide. We're speaking with New York City Comptroller John Liu. Mayor Bloomberg made an unimaginable fortune in technology and a reputation that earned him a third term as a manager. But the biggest black eye on his administration has been a contract called City Time that spiraled completely out of control. It went from cost of about $70–80 million to almost $800 million, and now there are investigations and a huge scandal over it. What was that all about? And do we know how it happened?
Boy, Ken, this is the City Time project obviously is a deep blemish on city government. And it's a project, as you mentioned, a technology, essentially a computerization project.
The payroll record system.
Keeps track of how much time city employees are working. To me, not really rocket science. A project that was supposed to make it more efficient and accurate was supposed to cost taxpayers $63 million. And by the time I took office as comptroller, the city had already paid well over $700 million. And a cost increase of more than 1,000% and years delayed. This is a project that my office stopped additional contracts for, additional funding for the implementation of, and forced it on a very strict time frame for completion. And lo and behold, it is now almost done, hopefully, knock on wood here, without any additional cost to taxpayers. Unfortunately, in the process, with such huge cost overruns, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that there's got to be some problems with it. And so the U.S. Attorney's Office has now arrested a number of people for allegedly stealing tens of millions of dollars.
Padding their own time records.
And that's the whole irony of it. This system was supposed to keep track of city employees' time, and the people working on this project for this huge defense contract apparently did not keep their own time properly and are now accused of stealing lots of money from city taxpayers. An example, City Time being an example of a project that just was not managed, had gone completely out of control. And one of the problems with it was that it was based on time and expense billing for these high-priced consultants. You know what time and expense billing does? It incentivizes these consultants to take as long as they possibly can and bill as many hours as they can without needing to provide clear deliverables. So that's something that my office has been applying to all the other contracts that the city is taking out. We have prevented other contracts from using this time and expense basis, or sometimes it's called time and materials.
Right. So instead it's a fixed fee, and then it doesn't matter, whether the contract gets bigger or smaller. The contractor's only going to get the same amount of money.
Well, that's right. We're insisting on clear deliverables, time frame, as well as exactly what is going to be delivered and for exactly how much.
Where did the supervision of this break down?
It's hard to say. I would, one of my theories is that when they spent $100 million on a project that was supposed to cost $63 million, they probably felt that it would take a little bit more, and they kept paying. At $200 million, at $300 million, there was probably some kind of a concept that, oh, we already paid this much for it, we got to finish it.
In too deep
In too deep, because that's precisely the rationale that they were pressuring me with, that with $700 million into the project, how can I even think of stopping the project? Of course, to me, that was just a sheer misunderstanding of the concept of sunk cost. But no matter what, at least for now, CityTime is on its way to complete implementation without additional cost to taxpayers, and we're trying to recoup some of the money that had been allegedly stolen from the taxpayers.
You have moved the office in a couple of interesting directions. One is to focus some of your audits not just on the financial controls of a city agency, but the performance of certain programs, whether they're doing window guard inspections as an example, but also to encourage the public to come forward with suggestions of areas where they should audit. Is that a big departure from what your predecessors did?
You know, Ken, I don't know if it's a departure. I just know that it makes sense to me as an elected official, as somebody who the people of New York gave this great privilege of serving as Comptroller to. The audits have always been, for me, about making government better. And we make government better by, number one, ensuring that there is no waste, no abuse, no fraud of taxpayers' funds, and that even using the money, that every single city agency is fulfilling their mandate as effectively and efficiently as possible. So you mentioned, you alluded to a report we recently released about the fact that certain city agencies were not paying close enough attention to window guards being installed in apartment buildings. That's a problem. That's been a problem in the past. It's fortunately not as big of a problem as it was several years ago, but the problem still is that we should not wait until the next accident before making sure that these window guards are in fact installed as they should be.
But why is that your job as opposed to, say, the housing committee at the city council? Why isn't that an oversight responsibility as opposed to an audit responsibility?
It sure is an oversight responsibility, and I believe that the City Council Committee is paying close attention to this, and we've been sharing with them our audit results, the results of our investigations. We have a very professional audit bureau, and my auditors are able to go out into the field. They can check the numbers, they can check the books, but they also inspect what is actually happening with city agencies, what kind of work they're doing, whether it be window guards, or checking to see how long women have to wait for mammograms before a city hospital gives them the appointment. These are all functions that taxpayers pay for and expect results from city agencies. And it's my job to make sure that the money's not being wasted, but also to make sure that the agencies are on top of it.
There's always a certain amount of tension between the controller and the mayor, whoever it is. Some have better personal chemistry, some have better working relationships, some it's a very hostile relationship. There's a lot of reports in the press that relations between the mayor and you, the Bloomberg administration and your office are, so we say, not what they were under the previous controller. What's the truth of that? What's the reality of how your office and his and you and he interact kind of on a daily basis?
We have regular interactions. I call the mayor every so often on important issues. We have sat down, we meet, and our top-level deputies meet also on a regular basis to work together. And we do work very closely together on many different issues. You know, media is not always interested in the areas where we're working very closely with. And then there are some cases, such as the CityTime project, that we have had significant disagreements on, such as the pension policy that we do disagree on. But I do my job. I as I said before, I am honored and gratified to have this job, and I pursue my responsibilities vigorously. And to the extent that the Comptroller's office, I'm not the first Comptroller, I'm the 43rd. The Comptroller's office is designed by the collective will and wisdom of the people to be a counterpoint, a check and balance on the mayoralty, which is very powerful in New York City. To the extent that I'm being aggressive as City Comptroller, there are times when there will be significant disagreements and the media will play on the tension. But overall, the mayor's got a very tough job. And I, as a City Comptroller, I have a mandate from the people, and I intend to fulfill that mandate as much and as vigorously as possible.
Now, the political history, if I can be political for a second, the political history of the modern office of Comptroller, at least since I've been tracking it, going back to Mayor Abe Beame, has not been one that's had a lot of great successes afterwards. Mayor Beame did become the mayor, but then got subsumed in a financial crisis and didn't have a second term. Jay Golden, Liz Holtzman, Alan Hevesy, Bill Thompson all sought other offices. And I think with the sole exception of Hevesy becoming the state controller, none of them actually were able to move anywhere from the city controller's office. So is the job politically cursed?
Well, you know, they say that about the mayor of New York City. That right. Apparently has been referred to as a dead-end job also, because nobody's ever moved on from the mayor's position in New York City. I don't know. I mean, this is a position that I am so excited to be in. I ran for this position with an eye towards making change, helping steer the city in the right direction. Professionally, I had a financial background before I was elected to anything, and I combined that background with the 8 years that I spent in the City Council learning about city operations.
So are you planning on running for a second term?
The voters have given me 4 years to do this job, and that is my lens on everything. It's a 4-year term. If I complete everything that I set out to do within these 4 years, and I feel that I can do more if the voters gave me another 4 years, then at that point I will make the case to the voters what more I would like to do in this office in another 4 years. But I would never make the case that, oh, I need 4 years longer to do the job that I set out to do in the first 4 years. So it's hard to say what will happen, but I'm 17 months into this position, and it's a great place to be.
My thanks to New York City Comptroller John Liu. I'm Ken Fisher. Thanks for joining us on this edition of CityWide.